For centuries, if you wanted to dominate a battlefield, you needed one thing: an armored aristocrat on a huge horse. These guys, the knights, ruled through sheer force and, let's be honest, their social status. Just picture it, right? The late medieval period. You've got towering castles, clashing swords, and the earth-shaking charge of heavy cavalry. And at the center of it all, the knight. Decked out in thousands of dollars of custom-plate armor, he was basically a walking tank. To a regular foot soldier, he was pretty much invincible. So what finally brought them down? It wasn't a bigger sword or a stronger bow. Nope. It was this loud, kind of clunky, and painfully slow-to-load firearm. But here's the kicker. It was a weapon that anyone could use. You didn't need noble blood or a lifetime of training. And it was about to change everything. So that's what we're diving into today, the story of the musket. We're going to look at how it evolved from these early hand cannons, the wild new tactics it spawned, how it literally ended the age of the knight, how it spread across the entire globe, and maybe most importantly, how it created the modern army as we know it. Okay, so where did this game-changing weapon even come from? Well, it didn't just appear out of nowhere. Its roots are in the slow, steady improvement of early gunpowder weapons, taking them from a weird, unreliable novelty to an absolute battlefield essential. The whole story really kicks off back in the 1400s with something called the arquebus, one of the first guns a single person could actually carry and fire. That eventually evolved into the heavier matchlock musket, which became the standard in the 1500s. But the matchlock had some major problems. You had to have this constantly lit cord, which, you can imagine, was a disaster in the rain. Plus, it kind of gave away your position at night. The real breakthrough, the big leap forward, happened in the 1690s when the much more reliable flintlock took over. So why was the musket such a big deal compared to the arquebus? It really boils down to one word: power. The musket was just a bigger, heavier, more powerful version. And that extra punch meant everything. For the first time, you had a weapon whose bullet could actually blast right through a knight's expensive plate armor. All of a sudden, the age of the armored knight was in serious trouble. And the flintlock mechanism? That's what really sealed the deal and made the musket perfect for huge armies. Instead of that burning cord, it used a piece of flint to strike steel and make a spark. This simple change fixed the matchlock's biggest flaws. It was way more reliable, especially when it was wet, and it was faster to prep for firing. And that combo, reliability and speed, is what turned a line of infantrymen into a truly terrifying wall of lead-spewing machine. All right, so you've got this powerful new weapon, but that's only half the battle, right? Armies still had to figure out the best way to use it, because the early musket had one gigantic, glaring weakness. And here's the core problem of the era. A musketeer was absolutely lethal for about 1 second. After he fired that one shot, he was a sitting duck for a solid minute while he went through the whole reloading process. A cavalry charge would just mow him down. The solution? The pike. Basically a super long spear. You'd have guys with pikes forming a spiky, protective wall so the musketeers could reload in peace. For like 150 years, the musket and the pike were a team. You couldn't have one without the other. I mean, just try to imagine doing this whole complicated reloading dance in the middle of a chaotic battle. You're fumbling with loose gunpowder, a ramrod, a lead ball, all while smoke is burning your eyes, cannons are booming, and enemy horses are charging at you. One little mistake, and your gun is just a heavy club. That long, vulnerable reloading time was, without a doubt, the biggest weakness of these early armies. And then, someone had a genius idea that changed everything. The bayonet. You just stick a big knife on the end of the musket. Suddenly, every single musketeer is also a spearman. He can fire that deadly shot from a distance, and if cavalry gets too close, boom, he's got a pointy spear to defend himself. Just like that, the pikeman, who had been a key part of armies for centuries, was suddenly out of a job. And this simple little invention, the bayonet, did more than just make the infantryman more versatile. It effectively slammed the doors shut on an entire way of life, an entire military and social order that was built around that noble armored knight. The old world was ending. Before the bayonet came along, the peak of this whole pike and musket strategy was the famous Spanish tercio. Think of it as a giant moving square of pikemen creating a safe space in the middle, with groups of musketeers tucked into the corners. It was a walking fortress that could unleash firepower in every direction and was an absolute nightmare for cavalry to even try to attack. So you can actually see this change happening over time. Just look at these numbers. Back in the early 1500s, an army was mostly guys with pikes, with just a few shooters sprinkled in for support. But as the guns got better and better, you see that ratio start to flip dramatically. By the time we get to the late 1600s, almost everyone is a musketeer. The gun had officially won. And this wasn't just a change in technology, it had huge social effects. There's this famous quote by the historian J.F.C. Fuller that says, "The musket made the infantryman, and the infantryman made the democrat." What he meant was, war wasn't just for the rich, highly trained nobles anymore. A king could take any peasant, train him to use a musket in a few weeks, and that peasant could now kill the most powerful knight on the battlefield. The power was shifting to the common man. And this whole revolution wasn't just a European thing. Not at all. The musket spread like wildfire across the entire planet, and it completely upended societies and changed the nature of war wherever it showed up. You see this weapon popping up all over the place, from huge battles between the Ottoman and Persian empires, all the way to the American Revolution. But its arrival in Japan during their Warring States period was especially dramatic. There's this famous battle, Nagashino in 1575, where an army made up of peasant musketeers under the warlord Oda Nobunaga just completely destroyed the elite samurai cavalry of an enemy clan. It was a massive shock to the system, and it changed Japanese warfare forever. And if you want to know just how fast this tech spread, check this out. Portuguese traders first brought firearms to Japan in 1543. Just a few years later, Japanese blacksmiths weren't just copying them, they were making them better. By 1546, that's just 3 years later, there were an estimated 300,000 firearms in Japan. That is an unbelievably fast adoption rate for such a game-changing technology. So you've got these huge changes happening in technology, in tactics, and in society itself. And it was all building towards one final massive transformation. It was going to reshape the very idea of what a country and its military even were. You can really draw a line in the sand with the musket. Before it, warfare was kind of this seasonal thing led by nobles out for personal glory. After it, war became about huge, professional, standing armies of infantry. It was about complex sieges and the absolute, unquestioned rule of gunpowder. And that, right there, is probably the musket's biggest legacy. Because these new armies were expensive. You had to pay them, feed them, equip them, train them. To do all that, governments had to get a lot more organized and centralized. They needed massive departments to handle taxes and supplies. Basically, the incredible cost and complexity of a musket army is what forced the creation of the powerful, organized nation-states we live in today. So, what's the bottom line? The musket wasn't just a new and improved weapon. It was the engine that created a totally new kind of military, one that ran on discipline, drill, and massive firepower from ordinary soldiers, all bankrolled and managed by a central government. It's pretty wild when you think about it. This simple iron tube stuffed with some powder and a chunk of lead, it was the little piece of tech that brought down the entire age of chivalry, made the regular foot soldier the king of the battlefield, and helped build the very countries that make up our modern world. Which kind of leaves us with a really interesting question to chew on, right? If the musket created the modern army as we knew it, big, state-funded, infantry-focused, then what technologies today are creating the army of tomorrow? You know, things like drones, cyber warfare, AI. What kind of new world are they building?